This past offseason, there wasn't a team that was in a more volatile situation than the Philadelphia 76ers. And it's because I've seen many times teams like this before. I've seen teams with two-star players that didn't necessarily work well together, but were able to achieve mild or moderate success, even though they weren't in the best situation to succeed. And when you're a Philadelphia 76ers team that completely failed to space out the half-court setting and put Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid on the same floor together, which shrunk the court already because Ben Simmons isn't necessarily known for his ability to hit outside jumpers. Joel Embiid periodically was able to hit three-pointers, but it wasn't necessarily his go-to skill. And the surrounding players were Tobias Harris, and you had Al Horford that you paid just because he had this ability to lock down Joel Embiid, and that's really it. It was really easy to tell that the Philadelphia 76ers were definitely not a good team, especially if you looked at them last year, especially when you pay attention to the fact that they got swept in the first round against the Boston Celtics. So entering that offseason, there were many directions that the Philadelphia 76ers could have gone. Would they trade Ben Simmons for James Harden, which many people were guessing that was the move they were going to make? How were they going to clear cap space? Were they going to retain their head coach? If they fired their head coach, who are they going to bring in instead? And what are they going to do about their general manager situation? Because with all due respect, Elton Brand was not making good and competent general manager decisions. And well, for the most part, they knocked each and every decision out of the park. So much so that they're the top team in the Eastern Conference currently. So what's going on, guys? Your boy Mike here. It's been a minute, guys, and we're going to be covering the rise of the Philadelphia 76ers in this video. Before we get to the content, leave a like to help this video in the YouTube algorithm. Consider subscribing and turning on our notifications. And now that we get all of that out of the way, cue the intro. Are you trying to come up with a quick side hustle during the pandemic? Well, let me show you my favorite new website to do so. It's called YouGov.com, and this is the easiest money you'll ever make. All you have to do is take some online surveys to earn points and get some cash rewards. They have polls and surveys about politics, public affairs, products, and brands. For example, right now they have surveys about unemployment, climate change, social issues, and more. It's free to join, and as a member, you'll earn points for completing short surveys and answering questions via their website or app. And you'll earn bonus points for completing your first surveys, and you'll be rewarded for recommending YouGov to friends and family. You guys see what I'm doing here? Honestly, I mainly use my YouGov cash to purchase extra skins and to pay for my Netflix subscription. So go to the link in the description down below to get started on YouGov. Mic check 1-2-1-2. What's going on, everybody? If there's one thing that the Philadelphia 76ers had in common with Doc Rivers about 4 months ago, it's the fact that both of them hit low points in their respective careers. Doc Rivers was just fired from blowing a 3-1 series lead in the Clippers Western Conference semifinals matchup against the Denver Nuggets, a matchup that everyone expected them to win, and the Philadelphia 76ers were consistently regressing, definitely down bad after acquiring Jimmy Butler and Tobias Harris to pair with Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid the year prior and coming up with a marginally better result. And I decimated the Philadelphia 76ers in years past as a result of this. There were some moves that they made that just genuinely bothered me because they were completely incompetent with their asset management. For example, they traded away Markelle Fultz to the Orlando Magic for Jonathan Simmons, a player that's not even in the NBA anymore. What was the point of doing that? He was the former #1 overall pick, and it's not like you had to pay him that much. They traded away Robert Covington, Dario Saric, a second-round pick, and Jared Bayless so they could bring in Jimmy Butler, but Jimmy Butler wouldn't re-sign with them. They wouldn't even attempt to re-sign JJ Redick in the offseason season prior, which in my opinion was probably the biggest mistake that they made out of all of their mistakes, and that's including the signing of Al Horford. JJ Redick was a very valuable contributor to the Philadelphia 76ers, and his perimeter shooting was the reason why Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid were able to work together. So what's the very first thing that the Philadelphia 76ers did? Well, two blue chip executives were able to hit the open market. The first being Daryl Mori, a general manager that essentially had to build a contender around James Harden during his time in Houston, despite being handcuffed by a very stingy owner. Daryl Mori wasn't necessarily allowed to build super teams around James Harden, so he did what he could do and surrounded him with good three-point shooters who were subpar defensively that allowed James Harden to cook more or less, and that's mainly what he was able to do in Houston. When the James Harden era appeared to be over, Daryl Mori moved on and was able to sign with the Philadelphia 76ers, and immediately his presence was felt. First of all, the Sixers still kept Elton Brand in the general manager role, but you could immediately see what transactions Daryl Mori had his fingers on. For example, bringing along Doc Rivers the moment he got fired, an experienced head coach that has won an NBA championship, who hasn't had the best decade, granted, over the past decade, but still is the type of presence that the Philadelphia 76ers could benefit from, and is clearly an upgrade from Brett Brown. The moment Daryl Mori took office, there were James Harden rumors running rampant, but what he did instead was he went to work on the Philadelphia 76ers salary cap situation, doing something that I believe exponentially catalyzed the Philadelphia 76ers route to relevance by somehow shedding the salary of Al Horford. All he had to do was part with an early second-round pick and a 2025 first-round draft pick, and he had to agree to take back Terrence Ferguson and Danny Green, which not only added a potentially good, streaky three-point shooter. I understand as a Laker fan that Danny Green does have his bad moments as well, but he only has one more year on his contract, and you are out of the horrible contract that you paid a center that is clearly past his prime. I went on record to say that this was the best transaction I've seen all off season, and I don't believe it was talked about nearly enough, but Daryl Mori wasn't done just yet. He noticed that the Philadelphia 76ers desperately needed to space out the floor, and he traded a player that wasn't necessarily working out well for the Philadelphia 76ers, although a very talented role player in my opinion, Josh Richardson, and an early second-round pick, the 36th pick in the NBA draft, for Seth Curry. And the results were remarkable enough to catapult the Philadelphia 76ers to number one in the East, but even better so, even though they're the top team in the East, there are clearly holes in this roster still, and it doesn't necessarily take a genius to figure out what the Sixers need coming into the trade deadline in order to become even better. For example, I mentioned that they needed to space out the floor as much as possible, but believe it or not, the Philadelphia 76ers currently ranked number 28th in the NBA for three-point field goals attempted per game and three-point field goals made per game, and they also are in the middle of the NBA ranking, number 17th overall in three-point field goal percentage in the NBA. If they're able to boost these numbers and boost these values by bringing in additional shooting, then I believe we're going to enter a situation where I could even see the Philadelphia 76ers making a run to the Eastern Conference Finals and even potentially being able to make it to the NBA Finals. The thing that the Philadelphia 76ers need the most going into the NBA trade deadline is three-point shooting and defense and a lot of depth. And they have some of it. Matisse Thybulle is a defensive stud. Ben Simmons is essentially who he is and is doing just fine on the Philadelphia 76ers. He hasn't necessarily made any large strides in any area whatsoever, and I suppose for the time being that is okay, at least for this year. Looking at his statistics all around the board, whether it's advanced or basic statistics, and I really don't like gauging a player's defensive potential based off of advanced statistics because I don't think his defensive statistics do him justice, because if you look at his defensive box plus minus, it's only improved marginally over the past couple of years. Regardless, you'd have to watch Ben Simmons play in order to see the strides he took defensively, because the stat sheet wouldn't necessarily show you all of that. I've always said that the best player on the Philadelphia 76ers is also the most undervalued player on the Philadelphia 76ers, and that's Joel Embiid. In an age where the NBA likes to neglect the traditional big man, Joel Embiid appears to have completely revolutionized what it means to be a NBA center, averaging 30.5 points per game to go with 11 total rebounds, 3 assists off of 55% shooting. He's even shooting 40% from 3 and has a player efficiency rating of 32.3. To give you an idea of how good that is better than James Harden. That is a higher player efficiency rating than James Harden has ever had during any year of his career. So if you're a Philadelphia 76ers fan, whether you make it to the NBA Finals this year or not, you should take solace in the fact that you have a competent front office making good decisions and building a potentially championship roster the right way by making good decisions. And as a fan of a team that has had a incompetent front office recently in years past, that is probably the best feeling that you can have. Let me know in the comment section down below, what do you guys think about the Philadelphia 76ers and whether they are sustainable or not. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.